Welcome back, and here we are with the fifth entry in our Proverbs series. And we started off in, of course, Proverbs 1, then we jumped to Proverbs chapter 10, and we've been going through chapter 10, and now we're at chapter 10, verse 9. And I'll be reading from the ESV version, and you'll see that displayed up there in the picture. If you want to read from a different version, it's always good to get different perspectives, especially considering that these are, after all, translations. So always good to get different perspectives there. And again, I'll be reading from the ESV here. Proverbs 10, verse 9. Whoever walks in integrity walks securely, but whoever takes crooked paths will be found out. So just some context here, and might be kind of obvious, but again, walking is an important thing to do. And of course we walk today. A lot of people walk a little bit extra, of course, to get exercise, to get their steps in, whatever it is. But these people back then, of course, walked a lot more than we do, and it was a very essential part of life, how they would get everywhere, basically. Proverbs frequently compares wisdom, living a life of wisdom, to taking a path. And it also contrasts, of course, the other kind of path. And just some examples of paths of different kinds. These paths are judged by where they lead, ultimately. Good paths lead to good places. Bad paths lead to places that you wouldn't want to go. Of course, there's the good. Good paths are straight, more direct, and less avoidable waste of energy, which is kind of what we're talking about today. In some cases, these paths are going up, which is more challenging, symbolic of a more challenging yet more rewarding. Going closer to God, you're going up, the symbolic side of that there. And there's also the narrow path, which is difficult to find. It takes wisdom to find it, but the narrow path takes you where you want to go. And now we get to the other kind. The other kind of paths. You have crooked paths, which usually are not good. Waste of time and energy. Deceptive even. And again, this is all symbolic. Of course, we're not talking about, if you're going hiking, that taking a crooked path is bad or anything like that. But to them, they would want to find the best way to get to a place that would waste the least amount of precious time and energy. Remember, this is very practical. You have to kind of think like those, the people back then, and also the people today who, if they're walking to get somewhere to work or something like that, they want to take the most direct way, waste the least amount of time and energy. And then there's also paths that go down. And of course, we talked about paths that go up, taking you symbolically closer to God. The paths that go down are the opposite. They usually lead to death, or the valley of the shadow of death. Again, there's a lot of symbolism there, and we'll get into all that later on, but just wanted to give you an overview of these different paths. And of course, you have the wide path. The wide path that leads to destruction, Jesus mentions, and also mentioned in other parts of the Bible. This means it's a path that's taken by most, unfortunately. And if we look around us even today, we see the lives that most people live, and most people aren't content. They aren't happy at all, which is not what Proverbs wants for us. A life of fulfillment is what the goal is here. And again, that the wide path is the path taken by most. You could say it's the way of mediocrity. That's how I see it. And really the whole point behind this, the detour, we used detour, that's our channel's name, detouring from this path of mediocrity, taking the path that leads to where you would want to go. So the benefits of integrity, now that we kind of went over those, something to keep in mind for future readings of Proverbs. Whenever they mention a path, there's a lot of significance to what kind of path it is. So we're looking at the path of integrity. Now, what are the benefits of integrity? Well, they're very similar to what we're talking about, the straight path. It's actually easier to take, even if a straight path is going up at an incline. It's easier to follow, and it's less confusing. No wasted time and energy trying to cover things up, or, if you're not living by integrity, you're trying to cover things up and deceive yourself, deceive others, whatever it may be. But there's a lot of wasted time and energy, rather than just telling the truth, just being true to who you are, your values. Takes a lot of time and energy actually to not do that, because again, you have to always kind of double check, because we crave consistency. In the end, we feel better when we are being consistent, believe it or not. So not walking in integrity is kind of the opposite. And again, nobody's perfect, and nobody's 100% practicing integrity. Of course, we try to practice it as much as possible, and it takes wisdom to do that. And again, this is a journey, and we've all made mistakes. We've all gone off the path at some point. But not walking in the path of integrity is the opposite. Again, it's like taking a crooked path, and that's exactly what it says here. So what is a crooked path? What does it do? Well, of course, it takes you longer. It doesn't lead to where you want to go, but it takes you longer to get there, and you're wasting more time and energy. And again, it's actually a more difficult path. Even if what usually takes people off the path of integrity or the path of wisdom is some sort of temptation to take some sort of shortcut or something like that. But in the end, it actually ends up costing you more time and energy. Not only does it take you away from where you're wanting to go, but it actually costs you more time and energy. And that's kind of the irony about not taking the path of wisdom. Just like anything, like we're talking about ill-gotten gains, trying to get something for nothing. And in the end, even if you get it, it's not worth it. But if you acquire wealth through wisdom, through the wise way of doing it, providing some sort of real service to people, and earning your money honestly, in the end, it's a much better reward. Whatever you do get from that, it's a better reward. And so the application here is, again, kind of straightforward, but it's something that we need to remind ourselves of. And that's true for a lot of these. A lot of these seem obvious, but how much of it do we actually do? We got to ask ourselves that question. Be aware of what path we're on. Be real with ourselves, truthful with ourselves. What path are we actually on? Are we actually walking the path of integrity? I know, especially if we're listening to this or watching this, we would agree that the path of integrity is the best way, but are we actually on it? Or are we deceiving ourselves in some way? And again, we could be on it. I'm not saying we're not, but something to pray about continuously, because again, it's walking a path, and it's walking the path every day, and there's always the possibility of leaving the path. And again, you can leave the path knowingly, and you could leave the path unknowingly. But either way, you've left the path, and you need to know if you have left the path so you can find your way back onto the path. And that really brings us to the good news here, that the path of integrity is always open to us. Now, on the spiritual end, I believe in God's forgiveness through Jesus, and the opportunity there to get back, to get forgiven and get back right with God and get back on the path of integrity. Of course, you always lose something in getting off the path of integrity. I mean, you can never get years of your life back, but you can always walk on the path of integrity. That option is always there. But again, it's not easy. Again, this is straightforward, but it's not always easy. It takes wisdom and humility, but it is possible. No one is really willing to admit that they've gone off the wrong path. It's not an easy thing to do, especially if you view yourself as somebody who's intelligent and, admitting you made a mistake, error of judgment, that can be a difficult thing. But remember that true wisdom is really in admitting that you need more wisdom, that you can't lean on your own understanding, that you need God, that you need the wisdom of God.